I have so enjoyed all of the wonderful Bible conversations we have had so far. We started back in May, and it's fall now, and September kind of puts everything. People are all getting new routines. I started a new job. I'm working at Starbucks, and I've been training and memorizing all of the drink recipes, and my brain's a little overloaded, so I don't have a lot of margin. My husband is also teaching along with his regular job this semester. So we are kind of stretched to the max, as I'm sure many of you are, been talking to you and hearing your stories. And my one fear is that I don't want to give up. Remember back in the beginning when we said, let's take a journey and talk about the whole Bible over the course of a year and don't leave any of it out. And so I don't want us to give up, and I don't want to fail. So what I have done is I've organized, and I'll send you via email or whatever. I've organized the weeks we have left that go all the way back to Memorial Day. And I've divided them up so we can finish the whole cycle of finishing the whole Bible in a year. A lot of us at the beginning we started off with this book, The 52 Weeks, which is a great book. And so if you're doing that, keep doing it. What I discovered over the course of our conversations is this book doesn't really ask the questions people are asking, and wanting to know and have the conversations that we're getting from actually reading the text. There's nothing wrong with this. The questions are just very introspective and more about how you relate to the concepts in the Bible. But the conversations I've been having with you all just kind of have moved beyond what that book is. So if you're still reading that book on those cycles, I am going to, I have listed what weeks the readings are from that correspond with this book. So if you're still liking this and still doing this, and this is your tool, you'll be able to just follow that along with the schedule I made just for us, which is going to go in a little bit different order than what that book did for the rest of our time together, so that we can get through that whole entire year. We have talked about so much so far. In the beginning, we talked about all these things about the Bible. Why this? Why that? Why this? And we've gotten through a huge chunk of the Bible. Just to recap, we finished all the books of law, which are Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Now, those first 5 books of the Old Testament they're written by Moses. They're recorded down by Moses, but it's what God is dictating to Moses to write down. One of the things I always like to point out to people that God specifically chose Moses to reveal himself, reveal his law, reveal his plan to restore all of creation back to its original glory and splendor. And it was no accident. Moses, if you remember, he was raised an Egyptian prince. He was raised at the time he knew how to read and write. In Egypt, they were having papyrus, so he could actually write things down. So not an accident that all of these things happened at the time in God's plan. In the book of Genesis, we have the creation story, the fall of man, Noah and the ark, and Abraham and Jacob and Isaac, and all of those stories, all of that history, the original history of humanity from Adam in the book of Genesis. And God is using words and stories and scenarios that we can understand. When he explains creation and doing it at different days of the week, I always remind people. I know in my childhood, people used to argue, well, it could have been done in a day and this and that. Well, we know time is relative from all of our science fiction movies. And God's time is different than what our time is. And time fluctuates. We do know from the book of Genesis that at one point in time after the flood, God decided that the human lifespan should be shortened to right around 100 years. When before that, we had people living to 900 years. Genesis ends really with the story of Joseph and his brothers are reunited with him in Egypt. After the famine, Joseph and his brothers become the 12 tribes of Israel, are descended from each of the brothers. And they're in Egypt, and things are going well because Joseph is highly favored by Pharaoh, and things are well for a couple generations. But then eventually, as they start to grow as a population, one of the pharaohs decide that they're a threat. The Israelite people are a threat, and so they enslave them. And so Exodus is the story of God delivering the Israelite people out of Egyptian slavery and captivity. And you see all of these miracles performed because God is revealing himself to his people. In Exodus, you see all of these things happen. You see that they get rescued, and right away they're disobedient. And their disobedience, God is teaching them the whole time to be obedient and just to listen, and they never get it right. They even build an idol at one point. And so none of those people that fled into the desert to escape Egypt ever got to go to the promised land. God made sure that generation died out. The children of those people did get to go into the promised land. And so you see in Leviticus, you see all of these rules that are given for while the Israelite people are in the desert, and foreshadowing to when they're going to be in the promised land. There's all these rules that permit God's presence to reside with his people, because God wants to be with the Israelite people, his people that are set apart and different. They are his people, because God cannot be in the presence of sin. Sometimes think about it as magnets. It just can't be. You know how the magnets push and polarize things in the opposite direction. So all of these things that God is having the people do are to really almost like push the sin away or push the sin off so he can dwell with them right there. And that's why you have all of those kind of things being explained in Leviticus. And then in Numbers, we get a lot more genealogy, and it's setting the stage really for the arrival of Jesus. All of these people that we read about are in Jesus's family tree. And then when you get into Deuteronomy, after Numbers, Deuteronomy, Moses knows that they're about to enter the promised land. So he's preparing that generation, the children, to go in. He's reminding them of the things their parents witnessed and when they fell short and when their parents were disobedient. And he's reminding them of all the things they're going to have to do when they're in the promised land, because he doesn't want them to forget. And they haven't seen a lot of those miracles firsthand like their parents did. And their parents seen them, and they still fell short and were disobedient. Deuteronomy ends with the death of Moses. In fact, it even seems as if Joshua picks up and writes the last part of Deuteronomy after the death of Moses. And then you move into the book of Joshua, which is the story of Joshua written by him, and he is now the leader that has led the Israelite people into the promised land. So you hear a lot about the battles and the things that they had to go and learn to still be obedient in all of these things that God was telling them and directing them to do, like when they march around the walls of Jericho and make a loud noise and the walls fall down. So all of those things in Joshua are talking about the history of the people actually in the promised land. And so that's when the books change. So Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy are the books of the law, written down by Moses, dictated by God to Moses. This is what God is revealing to Moses, and he is writing it down. For the first time in human history, God is communicating to all of us and telling us his plans for restoration of all the universe, all of creation. It's everything. Sin corrupted every little part of DNA of creation. Like to think of it as the ultimate virus, and nothing escapes it. And God has a plan for us to escape it. And that plan is revealed and set up in the book of law, which is the same book of law that the Jewish people still use today, and they're the exact same words that Moses wrote all that time ago, and all of those generations. They've been preserved through manuscripts and things. People think that the Bible or even the book of the law is a copy of a copy of a copy, and so it's far different than what the original was. In this case, the five books of law are exactly how God intended them to be, and throughout thousands of years of manuscript collaboration, there's no error or difference between any of the copies of any significance. Only errors that can be found from one manuscript to the other are like punctuation. One source I read said in that entire book of law, there's like a page in a paperback that lists some misspellings and some things that are not integral to the message, but it would only fill up one page because it is that accurately preserved, because God wanted that preserved for you and me, exactly what he wants us to know. So then we're going to move on into the book of Judges. And Judges, we've all been so busy this fall, we haven't really got to have a lot of conversations about Judges. And man, if you start reading Judges, you just want to ask the question, why is this book even in the Bible? And what are these horrifying things that are happening? And why am I reading about this? So I am going to start doing what I did in the beginning when we started in the spring, and doing a little talking video every week. So that way there, if you can't make it to the Zoom or you can't make it to our in-person meetings, you'll have a little video to reference so you can still keep learning and you can still stay right with it so we can finish out the whole Bible in a whole year together. So this is kind of the recap. Gets excited to go forward. I have on Thursday evening, I have 5 new ladies from my area. Some are completely new to the Bible. And we're going to start. I'm going to start with them just like I started with you guys in the spring. And so, but I'm going to start, there was enough to form one group, so I'm going to start at the beginning with them. And now we have a more solid plan to go forward. So I'm excited to start conversations that are very meaningful and can help break down walls and barriers that we put up between each other and people that believe different things than we do.